The beginning of June is here, Taylor. Animal care staff here at Wildlife Rescue. And so it's been a couple weeks. Are you ready to do another video?
I sure am. Let's get into it.
Okay. Here's an image that you sent to me. We'll talk about this one in just a bit. But the little babies are starting to grow up. And so we do still have plenty of orphans coming in. We have about 120 animals here on site right now.
Yeah.
And so we've kind of phased from the peak of squirrels and opossums to more raccoons. And so we do have multiple litters of raccoons here. And so this is a video I took right before feeding time. And so they're all kind of vibrating with anticipation.
Yeah, ready.
And so usually, when do you find them most vocal?
Right before feeding time, most definitely. Especially when, if we just opened the enclosure and pulled one out to start feeding, then the other ones are going to start going crazy, ready and waiting to be put on the bottle themselves.
All right. In terms of being put on the bottle, I got a couple videos of that process. And so, now, in the background on here, you will see there is like a goat milk yogurt container. Are we feeding these guys goat milk yogurt?
We are not. That is what we use to hold the syringes full of the raccoon formula and put warm water in. Just like a human baby, we need to feed them warm milk. So that is just the most convenient container to put that in.
And is it goat milk that we're feeding them?
No, it is a very specific raccoon formula that is specially made for them.
Yes, indeed. And so we purchased this in bulk as a dehydrated product that we have to reconstitute and get ready for each day. And so we are going to end up using bottles for things that are this size as opposed to syringes. And so moving forward with this process, and so everything is measured out, so that's why we're using syringes. And if you overfeed, that's one of the most common causes of diarrhea in neonates, regardless of species. And so you do have to make sure that everything is being given appropriately. So what do you think of this particular raccoon?
In terms of him being on the bottle, he seems like he kind of maybe understands what to do. Still a little bit confused. I'm sure after this, with some time, he was able to get onto it and start suckling himself, but you can see he's having a little bit of trouble. It usually takes a while for the babies to figure out what exactly to do, how to figure it out, so this is probably right at the beginning of that stage, and then you can see he figures it out, something clicks in his brain, and he's able to latch on and start suckling.
Gotcha. And then, so overall, do you find that how strong an individual personality do you have in them when they're this age?
They're pretty strong. It's something that we'll talk about before feeding or after, leave the hospital. And then it's like, man, did you have a really hard time with green? We will color them with cattle markers to tell them apart. And then, one of the interns might be like, no, but orange I had a really hard time with. So it really is personality-wise with these guys.
And so how do you keep yourself from wanting to talk to
them? Knowing that the best thing for them is to not. So even though we might think that, it's going to be so sweet and I'm having this special bond, that is just not the case. For these animals, our goal is to get them back out into the wild. And in order to do that, they need to have a healthy fear of humans. And so by just keeping that in mind, going into it, it's pretty easy to get out of that initial maybe instinct to talk to them.
And so a lot of your day is feeding babies right now?
Right now, yeah.
And so is it still exciting?
It is still exciting. Sometimes I think it's easy to forget, especially when all the raccoons are screaming their heads off and you have to get through 10 of them before you leave for the day or whatever may have you. But then I also think these moments are a really good time to just be intentional in your mind and be like, wow, what a unique opportunity to be able to do something like this. So.
And also you can see, the spot in our treatment area where we do the baby feedings is right in front of a window. That way they're getting some natural sunlight, some natural exposure. And also, if anyone comes on our tours, which we have every Saturday, then this time of year, you'd be able to directly witness the care happening. And then after they're fed, this was what the group looked like post-feeding.
Yes, that's about right.
And so happy little orphans. And then they're only to the point of stage where they need that bottle feeding.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do you transition them from the bottle to solid food?
Yeah, so we have something that we have called or named raccoon custard. It is made out of the raccoon specialized formula that we purchase in eggs. And so then that is usually a really good weaning tool, as well as just like specialized diets that over the years we've learned to curate for specific animals and what they're going to want to eat and what they're going to enjoy at that age. And so once they start eating that, we can start cutting back the feeds and introducing more foods, more natural diets as they go into the nursery and eventually outside.
And so in the nursery, so a lot of times when you hear the word nursery, you'd think for the youngest of animals. The jargon here is a little bit flipped, where the hospital areas where we have the ones that are still required temperature support, that still require bottle feeding, and the nursery, it'd be more like the elementary school of their development. And so tell me, you took this picture.
I did take that picture.
What's happening here?
Those two raccoons have officially graduated, we'll say from pre-K to elementary school, using your metaphor there. So they are still on, I think, 2 bottle feeds a day, so they're still getting that supplemental feeding, but at this age they are eating more of that natural diet that I was talking about. So they're eating more fruits and vegetables. We're introducing mice to them at this point. And then once we realize that they are eating all the food on their own, we'll start cutting back the feeds in totality. And then once they're eating kind of the food in a bigger size, then we'll move them outside.
And so at this stage, it's still a pretty controlled area. There's still lots of soft structures to keep them from injuring or getting caught on things. But the next step is natural enclosures, is heading outside. And so we have not just raccoons hanging around, but we do have some foxes as well. And so I thought this was a pretty spectacular moment that you captured, with some gray fox kits hanging out, and then all of a sudden they get startled. And so this is in a den box in one of the outside enclosures.
Yes.
And so at this stage, they are ready to be on their own in terms of, they're not ready to be released to the wild yet, but they are ready to, in a structured environment, we're providing food and water for them to be able to take care of their routine needs and grow and develop until they're capable scavengers for.
Yes, yeah, they're eating on their own. They're gaining. They can, exactly as you said, not be on that heat support anymore. They're still on weight checks and everything, and we're still going out there, like you said, to feed them every day. But you can see that they were startled, and that is exactly what we want to see from the animals at this age, at this point, to start developing that healthy fear that I was talking about.
And it's just had to include the sound there. It's just not quite the same without it. And then we had a pretty significant procedure over this last week. So this is images of a western gray squirrel that had developed a number of issues with its eye. It started becoming proptosis. It was hyphemic. Those are fancy words, meaning it was shifting out of its socket. It was filling with blood. It was a non-functional eye. And so while this looks like a pretty robust squirrel, this is a little guy. This one, it was only 250 grams when I performed the surgery to remove that eye itself. And so this is an image from a previous patient, but the squirrels are obligate nasal breathers. So as long as you're getting the air and gas and anesthetic into their nose, they'll be able to stay under sedation for surgery. Because the way their jaws are, you can't intubate them as readily as you can other species. So I think this was one of your first experiences assisting for surgical support. What did you think? It
was, I will say, a little intense. There was a couple moments where I was like, okay, thinking on your feet, figuring out what steps are the most important to finish this up as fast as possible. And you kept your cool. It was really cool to see, to witness. And he's doing great now. So it was cool to see it from before, during, and after the whole process.
Yeah, so anesthesia, by definition, is when you're taking a patient's own life support systems offline. You're taking them to the line between life and death. And so it does take a lot of practice, a lot of skill to develop doing all those components safely. But we got our patient through it. We don't do a lot of surgery here. We do a lot of triage, like wound management, but not a lot of big surgeries. They only come up every once in a while. And so now this is a one-eyed squirrel. What is going to be the fate of a one-eyed squirrel?
We are still going to release him. We'll probably go through a couple more rigorous tests once he goes outside to make sure that this visual impairment isn't going to have any like severe negative effects. So we'll put him into a space that he's never been into before, and make sure that he can get around to a good degree before we move forward with the release. But based on how he's acting in his current enclosure, I would say the chances are really high. Gotcha.
And you never know for sure, but we give him every chance that we can. And there was a couple of folks who asked for follow-up on the patients we talked about last time. As a veterinarian, I always say patients, but do you usually refer to the animals as patients?
I usually refer to them as patients, okay. I think, yeah.
All right. So the owl, who also had that enucleation performed, how's that owl doing?
I released him later that week.
You released him?
I released him.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what was the release like?
It was spectacular. I personally love working with the raptors. Those are some of my favorite animals, and especially the great horned owls are my favorite. So it was really special. We boxed him up, and then I took him later in the evening, right as the sun was going down, right as dusk hit, and drove out about 30 minutes back to where he was found and opened the box, and he just took off. So it's always amazing to see stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, great horned owls, I mean, they're feisty. They have a lot of attitude.
That's why they're my favorite.
Gotcha. And then that little skunk who was kind of on quarantine down in the hospital area. What's happened with that fella?
Yeah, he finished his quarantine. He didn't show any other symptoms that we were necessarily concerned about for zoonotic disease. So we introduced him to some conspecifics. I always have trouble with that word. Some other skunks of a similar age, and he is now outside on his own. Well, not on his own, but with the other skunks. Doing good. All
right. So yeah, still growing and developing till they're ready for the developmental stage to be safe for release. And then the squirrels and opossums, initial first wave of squirrels and opossums, they've kind of aged out of the nursery or out of the hospital and are either in the nursery or the outside enclosures for the most part.
Yeah, and even in the nursery, most of them have aged out. I think there's only like really a couple squirrels in there and a couple of opossums, but for the most part, they're all outside or all released from that first wave.
Aha, yes. And so I actually got to do the release on one group of orphaned opossums. So this was a group of 9. It was a few different. They didn't all come in as one group of 9. They came in as a couple different groups that we put together since they were the same age to help learn the tricks of the trade, to help them develop. You always want to put if you never want to have an orphaned singleton. You always want to have others of the same age and species to help them develop. And of those 9, like 7 of them, just when the door opened, they just trucked their way out. They just like headed down to the. This was on a property that had a creek bed, so they were just heading down towards that creek and water, and just dispersing, kind of spreading out like a fan from there. There were a couple who took a different strategy, and so these guys. Oh, this was just a couple before they were just heading out. And so for orphans, we actually have a network of about 50 property owners who are happy to have wildlife on their property, where once they're of the appropriate age, we'll release them. For adults, when injured adults come in, those adults do already have a territory. They do already have a space, a niche that's carved out in our environment, so the adults have to go back to the immediate vicinity where they were found. But the orphans, there's a little bit of flexibility, and so we'll use this network. And if anyone has property and wants to be part of our network, please do reach out. We're always looking for more. And so one of them decided, hey, I think this tree looks cozy. And so was just settling in and hanging out, having a grooming session.
Wow.
Now this was a group of 9, so they were piled on top of each other, so we had a little bit of grooming to do. But the active grooming is going to be highlighting one of the main advantages of opossums in our environment. And one of the reasons that this property owner actually went out of his way to say he was so happy to have them is because opossums will eat a lot of ticks. The one study said up to 5,000 ticks per opossum lifespan, which is not a long lifespan compared to other species. And so it's not that they're going out and like hunting the ticks, but what happens is the ticks will get on the opossums, and then as they groom themselves, they'll snack on them from there. And so the opossum already getting ready for that. The other fellow, so like I said, this was on a hill. It was a pretty high angle. Most of them were fanning down. This one guy decided to hang out at the tree. And then there's one individual that decided, I'm heading up. And so he just was trucking it up the hill, and then was even decided to go up the tree. And so now we see a lot of orphans, especially raccoons, will naturally climb up a tree once they first get released. Opossums, not as typically, but you never know. And so here he was for the final moment. I didn't want to keep stressing him out by being too close in proximity, but once he found his spot, went ahead and wish him the best of luck. And so this is the whole point, is getting these animals back out into the wild. And so I hope you guys appreciate our insight of what's been going on here at the Wildlife Center these last couple weeks. And then hopefully we will see you again later.
Yeah. See you soon.